All right, and we're live. Good morning, aloha, and welcome to the Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum webinar to honor the anniversary of the victory in Europe, May 8th, 1945. We're so fortunate to have retired Air Force Brigadier General Charles E. McGee, Tuskegee Airman and legendary combat fighter pilot. We're also thrilled to have active duty National Guard Major General Vares-Lum, who's currently assigned to the commander of the Uss IndoPacific Command here at Camp Smith, Hawaii. We have several educators here in the background working: Ford, Eric, Melissa, and Ashley. They help to monitor the chat and answer questions you have as we go along. So please add your questions for our honored speakers to the question and answer, and please add any comments you have to the chat during our program. In our last webinar, we had attendees for our webinar from all over the world, and we'd love to know where people are watching from, so please consider adding your home state or country to our chat. Most importantly, please remember when you add comments to be thoughtful and kind. First, I'd like to give a brief review of the victory in Europe. So I'm going to go and share my screen, and we'll take a look at a few pictures. All right. Okay, so in February 1945, the Allied leaders were working together to defeat Adolf Hitler, the leader of Nazi Germany. On the 4th of February 1945, the Allied leaders, Prime Minister Winston Churchill of the United Kingdom, President Franklin D. Roosevelt of the United States, and Premier Joseph Stalin of the Soviet Union met in Yalta on the Black Sea coast of Crimea to plan the final defeat and occupation policy for Germany, and also to discuss the establishment of the United Nations. A month later, in March 1945, the Germans were in retreat. The Allies were on the west bank of the Rhine, the traditional border of Germany, where no foreign army had crossed in 140 years, since Napoleon in 1805. From March 22nd to the 24th, the Allies together crossed the Rhine and entered enemy territory. By the 30th of April, Berlin was surrounded and Adolf Hitler committed suicide. Hitler's named successor was Grand Admiral Karl Donitz. During his brief spell as Germany's president, Donitz negotiated an end to the war with the Allies. On the 4th of May, British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery accepted the unconditional surrender of German forces. The document of surrender was signed on behalf of Germany by General Alfred Jodl and came into effect the following day. Now, the Victory in Europe Day, May 8th, 1945, was one that remained in the memory of all that witnessed it. It meant an end to nearly 6 years of a war that had cost the lives of millions. It had destroyed homes, families, and cities, and brought huge suffering and privations to the populations of entire countries. Millions of people rejoiced in the news that Germany had surrendered, relieved that the intense strain of total war was finally over. In towns and cities across the world, people marked the victory with street parties, dancing, and singing. This photo here is from Times Square in New York City. The next photo is the Champs-Élysées in Paris, France, where huge numbers of people flocked to the center of the city to celebrate. At 3 p.m. on VE Day, Winston Churchill announced the welcome news that the war had ended in Europe, but he included a note of caution saying, "We may allow ourselves a brief period of rejoicing, but let us not forget for a moment the toil and efforts that lie ahead." He knew that the war was not over. Japan still had to be defeated. Not everyone celebrated the victory in Europe. For those who had lost loved ones in the conflict, it was time to reflect. Amidst the street parties and rejoicing, many people mourned the death of a friend or relative, or worried about those that were still serving overseas. The hardships of the war years had taken their toll on many people and left them with little energy for rejoicing. So today we have two very special guest speakers to talk to us about the victory in Europe. First, I'd like to welcome Major General Suzanne Vares-Lum. Again, she is attached to the Commander, U.S. Indo-Pacific Command here at Camp Smith. She's going to talk with us about why it's important to remember this day and what we can learn from our past history. General Vares-Lum, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you, Monica, and aloha everyone from Hawaii. I'm joining you today from Camp Smith, Hawaii, which is the headquarters of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, and just up the road from Pearl Harbor. I am deeply honored to be a part of today's program, celebrating the heroes of World War II and commemorating the end of World War II in Europe. And Brigadier General Magee, I am so honored, deeply, deeply honored to be part of this webinar with you. And thank you so very much, Monica, for that kind and informative introduction, and to the members and leaders of the Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum for hosting this webinar. I know there's a lot of behind the scenes work going on. And I would also like to extend a very special thanks to all of you in the virtual world in attendance today. Wherever you are dialing in from, and I saw a lot of different places when I looked at those coming on, wherever you're dialing in from on this historic 75th anniversary of the Victory in Europe Day, your participation today serves as a tribute and sacrifice to the sacrifice and service of our World War II veterans. The 75th commemoration series of events is designed to tell the story of our veterans' experiences during the war, and to help all generations understand the price of freedom, and to remind us that our freedom will always be worth defending. The legacy of our World War II veterans lives on in our hearts and minds of Americans, as well as our allies and partners, and the values we embrace in our American way of life. These patriots will always be remembered as our greatest generation, giving all they had, fighting across the globe to liberate people. And I don't know if you can see that picture there of our late Senator Daniel K. Inouye, and at the time that he passed was the senior most senator in Congress. He's a great reminder of that greatest generation, along with General Magee and so many others. And we honor their actions taken to defend life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, to bring peace to the world. The World War II legacy here in Hawaii is significant. The echoes of World War II live on and serve as a constant reminder of the faithful service of our veterans. The Aloha State, as we like to call Hawaii, graciously hosts several World War II memorials dedicated to the men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice for our great nation. And as you can see here is the Uss Arizona Memorial sitting at Pearl Harbor. So if you can imagine that beautiful harbor on December 7th, 1941, it was a calm Hawaiian Sunday, and that morning was interrupted by tragedy. Following the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, the United States was thrust into war, not by choice, but by necessity. And it's interesting to note that Japanese Imperial Navy Admiral Yamamoto, who planned this attack, said, quote, "I fear all we have done is to awaken the sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve." And resolve is exactly what America had. Americans faced the strongest enemy in the world that the world had ever seen in Axis powers. However, this enemy underestimated America's will and determined spirit. Our belief in a common set of values, democracy, freedom, equality, and the belief that hard work can lead to success and achievement. A set of values that to this day unites us, inspires us, and drives us to succeed as one unified country. World War II changed our vision of what service looks like, as the faces of our heroes became more representative of the nation as a whole. Yes, indeed, our whole nation was mobilized in this war. Millions, in fact, more than 16 million American men and women served in the U.S. Armed Forces, and over 3.5 million in federal service, not to mention every single American making their contribution to the war effort. These men and women were our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, uncles, aunts, family, friends. You know, everyone in our nation heard the call and answered the call. And for the first time, women answered the call of our nation at a level we had never seen in our history. They held roles that were in our war effort that were traditionally held by men, whether they were truck drivers, women Air Force service pilots, you know, a lot of clerical and nurses on the front lines. All Americans fought in this war: African Americans, Asian Americans, Native Americans, Hispanic Americans, German Americans, Italian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and the list goes on, because everyone selflessly fought for freedom, liberty, and equality. And those heroes embodied what it means to be American. And as President Roosevelt declared during World War II, and I quote, "The principle on which this country was founded and by which it has always been governed is that Americanism is a matter of mind and heart. Americanism is not, and never was, a matter of race or ancestry. Indeed, the United States is a country based on values, not on race, gender, religion, or ethnicity. Our World War II veterans sacrificed to fight against tyranny, discrimination, persecution, and injustice. They defended the values of democracy, that all people are free and should be treated equally. Our veterans demonstrated unbelievable character and resiliency in willing the United States of America and our allies to victory. In the wake of battles of World War II, equality would be viewed forever through a different lens, a lens of hope, inspiration, and togetherness. You know, we sit here in the Pacific, and Hawaii was home to key training areas for those who fought in the Pacific. But at the same time, many of our Hawaii members went off to Europe to fight. And as many of you know, May is the Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and since we sit in the Indo-Pacific region, you know, this historic anniversary of victory over Europe, we are reminded of the thousands of Asian American soldiers who fought for this victory, and mostly in the European theater. One particular unit is the 10442nd Regimental Combat Team. It was an Army unit comprised of Japanese Americans that fought in the European theater during World War II. These soldiers experienced great success on the battlefield and were well known for giving it their all. In fact, they have a saying, "Go for broke," going for broke as if there was no tomorrow. The 10442nd Regimental Combat Team was the most highly decorated unit for its size in the US military history, and is so until today, including 21 Medals of Honor and 7 Presidential Unit citations. The 10442 was one of the many military units during World War II that represented the change taking place in the world, much like the Tuskegee Airmen. So, speaking of Tuskegee Airmen, we have a national treasure, of course, Brigadier General Magee. Today, it is an honor to share this virtual stage with Brigadier General Charles Magee. His extraordinary story is an inspiration for all Americans. General Magee paved the way for future generations of service members, leaders, and heroes, and I know he inspires me every day when I look at the challenges that we face here at US Indo-Pacific Command. You know, the impact of his legacy couldn't have resounded more when yesterday I heard the testimony and hearing of General C.Q. Brown, who is our Pacific Air Force's commander here. And he's a pilot and has been nominated by President Trump to become the very first African-American to lead the United States Air Force, and we couldn't be prouder. And he is just one example of the endless examples of how the world has ever changed by General Magee. General Magee represents the core values of what it means to serve and what it means to be American. And before I turn it over to him, I just wanted to leave with a final message with the youth online. That we talked about World War II being our greatest generation, but you are definitely our next greatest generation. You know, since 9/11, we've been in years of sustained conflict, fighting the war on terror. You are now experiencing COVID-19, a pandemic that we've never experienced before. So I just urge you that while this is 75 years, the lessons we learn from 75 years ago are still relevant today, that it's so important that we remember their sacrifice and we honor their service and we let their example inspire us to carry the torch to do great things. So it is my absolute privilege. What you've all been waiting for is I'd like to turn it over to Brigadier General Charles McGee. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Major General Vares-Lum. I so appreciate your comments today. Before we talk with General McGee, I know everyone is waiting to have a few words or ask a few questions, but I did want to go through a little bit of his oral history with our viewers today. It's a short oral history, so please continue to add your questions for either General Vares-Lum or General McGee on our Q&A, and watch this short video.
In June 1943, Charles McGee was one of the first graduates of an experimental Army pilot training program at the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. It was the first time in American history that African Americans were allowed to fly military aircraft. After graduation, McGee was assigned to the 332nd Fighter Group, where he escorted heavy bombers from the 15th Air Force over targets in occupied Europe.
I ended up in one dogfight and shooting down a Focke-Wulf 190, and we provided our escort, and only if the bombers were attacked did we dispatch a flight to fight off that attack. And I was dispatched, and fortunately was able to get a bead on the Focke-Wulf over the aerodrome. The dogfights take place pretty quickly, and in a few minutes it's over, and you're climbing back up to join back in or head back home yourself.
After 137 combat missions, the reality of war sinks in.
When you realize that, first of all, that fire they're putting up is meant to knock you out of the sky, they get your attention, and the idea is not to kill the other pilots. You don't go in with that, but to destroy the aircraft, and hopefully they bailed out. I'm not so sure in the case of mine that the pilot got out, but it was one or the other, and so you do your job.
After the war, McGee remained in the Air Force until 1973, retiring as a colonel. Charles McGee flew more combat missions in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam than any other Air Force pilot.
Thank you very much for watching our video. Right, next, I would like to ask Brigadier General McGee some questions. So, Brigadier General McGee, you've had many accomplishments over the course of your life, but I wanted to ask my first question about your early life for some of our younger viewers. So, as a young person, you became an Eagle Scout and studied engineering at the University of Illinois. These choices required persistence, dedication, and hard work. What led you to these pursuits early in your life?
That's an interesting question, but after graduating from high school, parents had said, you know, go to high school, go to college, but I had to work for enough money to go to college. I served a year with the Civilian Conservation Corps, and that's what got me interested in engineering, and was able at that time, a year's work gave me enough money to enter the state school, University of Illinois, and that was why I was in the engineering program at that time. I hadn't aspired before, but certainly my work for that year to raise enough money to go to college was a good incentive.
Mm-hmm. So my next question then is about aviation. So how did you become interested in aviation? I guess nowadays, young viewers, they have access to the internet, they have information about different career opportunities, but we didn't have, back in those days, you didn't have access to the internet or easy access to information at all. So how did you learn about the Army's experimental program at Tuskegee Institute?
That's an interesting question too, because my answer doesn't follow the norm. I had not been one of those interested in aviation. but it was part of Army policy that brought it to mind. The Army policy, well, in '39, they had the civilian pilot training program, and you could learn to fly, but then you could go next door to say, I want to be an Army pilot. That happened in Washington, D.C. A graduate from the civilian pilot training program went next door and said, I want to be an Army pilot. They said, sorry, we can't use a black pilot because we have no black mechanics. It turns out that because of that policy, once the decision was made they said experiment, because they'd studied the issue and knew it wouldn't be successful. But the mechanics for the first squadron authorized, that the 99th Pursuit Squadron, were entered training at Chanute Field, Rantoul, Illinois. That's 14 miles away from the university. And of course, certainly we were suddenly aware that there were blacks, even though not integrated, in training at Chanute Field. And what was it for? For the 99th Pursuit Squadron. I think my ROTC instructor said, well, why don't you try for the pilot side? And I went and passed the pilot exams, and that's the way that came about. But I learned about it because of the policy that the mechanics had to be trained before they would accept a pilot. They were successful, although expected to fail, and went south from their training to Maxwell Field while Tuskegee Army Airfield was being built. And that was also part of, they expected mechanics to fail. They didn't. They said, my gosh, we need an airfield for the pilots. And they found the money to build Tuskegee Army Airfield about 7 miles northwest of Tuskegee Institute. At that time, now Tuskegee University.
A necessary team of effort, that led to success. That's fascinating. So thank you so much for sharing that one. So my next question brings us to the military career. So you trained as a pilot, was successful, and then you had to go to battle in Europe. So you're in the European theater, and you had 137 successful combat missions. What do you think helped contribute to that success?
Well, certainly, and by the way, it should be 136. I don't know where near the end of my service, they dropped one off of my Korean and added one to Europe. So it should be 136 there, but the training is the key to me. We had excellent training. They didn't change the standards, and we were able to meet them, and it well prepared us. And then we also had good leadership in assignment to the 332nd Fighter Group, which the 302nd Squadron was one of the first three squadrons of the group. So to me, that was the key. Good training, and then of course the training of the support people as the squadrons pilots were trained and the units formed. It was a combination, but to me, good training, good leadership, success.
Yes, that's a definite, right? And then the training and of your support people as well. So again, those go hand in hand for any success. So another question I had about your military career, I feel like, and I imagine many others, is that you personally have lived through the challenges of war in a way that few other people have experienced, because you have had a record 409 aerial combat missions, and that record still holds today. So what do you think helped you to persevere through these dangerous missions?
Well, again, number one is, it turned out that after my first flight, I was hooked. To be able to go up and loop, roll, and spin, and come back and put your feet on the ground, it was a real thrill for me. And that I think is what sustained my career, being able to enjoy every minute of flying an airplane. And I took advantage of opportunities, not only to fly the fighter that I was assigned, but they had support aircraft like the C-47 and others, either take people to school or pick up supplies. I'm your pilot. So I took advantage of that opportunity. And back then, of course, it was also a little cheaper than today. And if planes were in commission and you wanted to get some extra nighttime, you could go down the line, get an airplane and go fly. I did that, as I say, and that's what I tried to pass on to youngsters. Among your talents, certainly hope that is something you like to do. I was certainly thrilled with flying. And now, the other part of that is, why me, how me, I don't know. I kept getting wonderful assignments without asking for them. And that paid off. And so I was fortunate to actively fly 27 of my 30 years of service. Somebody else has to answer that question, but I got picked, and I was, as I say, I'm ready. And it paid off. I enjoyed every bit of it, flying the different aircraft and carrying out the mission. And I enjoyed working with people, and certainly any squadron or unit, it's the people that you have and work with that also are part of that story.
I think that you highlight something about your training and how that led to being able to take care of all of those opportunities, take advantage of all those opportunities when they were presented. So I find that inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you.
Another question I have is, if you have experienced this adversity, do you have any advice that you could give young people as they faced adversity in their lives today?
Well, certainly I do, but I like to pass on to the youngsters as I talk to them and try to mentor their interest in aviation and space opportunities. But I do it with 4 Ps: perceive, prepare, perform, persevere. Perceive, dream your dreams, find your talents, and I like to add, and hopefully among them is something you certainly like to do. But prepare, get a good education, learn to read, write, and speak well, develop those talents that you discovered, and perform, always doing your best in anything that you do, but also keep excellence as your goal in all aspects of things that's your first. And finally, persevere. We could have let the circumstances go off with they call me names, they don't like me, go off and not serve our country. That wouldn't have helped us or our community or our country at the time. Don't let negative circumstances be an excuse for not achieving. I think that would carry them through whatever they face in the future, and certainly the young folks are our country's future. So I like to pass that on and hope it works.
Well, it sure worked for you. So I think that advice is definitely going to touch our viewers here today, and it touched me for sure. Yeah. But I think it's time. I've been getting questions from a lot of our viewers, so I don't want to take up all your time and ask all of my questions. So I want to open it up to some of our viewers, and also want to call back Major General Vares-Lum and the questions for her as well. So I'm going to have her come back on, and then the 3 of us will answer some questions from our audience.
Excellent.
And actually, while she's coming back on, sir, I can ask you the first question. I had a question that was actually similar to one that I was thinking about, but this is from Connor in New York. He said, what was it like to gain respect from those who didn't see you as an equal, and now having them respect you and hold you in such high regard, and thanking you and for what all the Tuskegee Airmen accomplished?
That is an interesting question. You know, our country was coming out of 10 years of depression when the war the decision was made to support our allies in Europe. Didn't change segregation, but provided opportunity, whether you want to enlist in service opportunities, the jobs that became available in the war buildup. It brought the country together in a way, as I said, didn't change segregation, but provided opportunity, one and all. And that was an early step that was very important.
All right, we have a lot of questions here. So I am going to ask you from Ava. So General McGee from Ava, was it ever scary or hard flying the planes?
I'm often asked that question, were you ever scared? And I just tell young today, if you get into flying and you're scared, you're in the wrong business. But fortunately, it takes the right training and takes the right attitude. So everybody might not be able to be a pilot, but there are other opportunities of service if you're scared. But hopefully that wouldn't be something you have to overcome to be a pilot or get into the space program.
All right, thank you, General. The next question I have is for General Vares-Lum. So this question is from Neil. Can you speak to being one of the first Asian American female flag officers in the U.S. military and how the legacy of our segregated units, such as the Tuskegee Airmen and the 100 and 442nd Regiments, played into your decision to join the military?
Well, thank you for that question. You know, I think I've always been fascinated with our veterans from World War II, many segregated units, just like General McGee and the 100-442. You know, they faced discrimination, but yet didn't let that become an obstacle, just like General McGee. So when you don't focus on the obstacles, but you focus on the possibilities, just as General McGee said, proceed and persevere. And really, you know, although I didn't use those words, for some reason, you know, I looked at, they showed that anything is possible. And in this country, really, when I mentioned about FDR and his statement that we are a country based on values, and that when we are all unified together for a common purpose, we realize that we all are all part of a humanity. And that made me realize not to focus on what obstacles are in the way, but what's in the realm of possibility. And of course, I've always been interested, because my father's a Vietnam veteran as well, that, you know, the courage and honor to protect something greater than yourself has always inspired me. And so that's really a short answer as to how our World War II veterans in that during that time inspired me.
Thank you, General. The next question I have is for General McGee. So this question, General, is from Clint Churchill. The P-51 was a powerful, complex machine compared to the P-50 and training aircraft. How difficult was it to check out in this plane and become effective as a bomber escort?
I didn't find it difficult at all. When we say, you know, ask an old fighter pilot your favorite aircraft, P-51 Mustang, but I always say you have to qualify it. With the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, it was tops for the day and time. We built the aircraft for the English and said, wow, we're going to use it too, and we did. It gave us speed, range, and altitude that no other plane had at that day and time. So we were happy campers to be able to have the opportunity to fly the aircraft. And when we went into escort work, at first we gave our P-39s to the Russians, picked up P-47 Thunderbolts. P-47 was a good aircraft, very roomy cockpit with the big radial nose, and its power limited in range and altitude. P-51, so P-47, you might say, very effective with formation flying and that up to 28,000 feet. P-51, you can go up 35,000 feet. That's the type of difference. And of course, technology today has put us in another world. It's a challenge for the young folks coming into our future aviation and space activities.
I have another aircraft question for you, General McGee. This question is from Luke J. He's asking, what types of aircraft did you fly from World War II through Korea?
Well, in my career, I've actually flown first pilot in probably 34, 35 different aircraft. But I flew, of course, we had in our training P-17, BT-13, AT-6, first fighter, P-40, Warhawk, later, as I say, P-39, P-47, P-51, F-89, and F-4s. My first jet was after Korea went to the Philippines, and they had given the Philippine Air Force had their P-51s. They're flying the F-80. So it was a matter of what came on board as time and technology keep advancing. I ended up my service in F-4s. My Vietnam experience was in the reconnaissance version of the F-4. And I like to tell the folks, by the way, we carried no weapons. We carried all types of intelligence gathering material. Speed was our only defense. We took advantage of that on a number of occasions. I didn't get a scratch in World War II. Had to put my plane hit in Korea, but got it back to the home base. That was a P-51 D model, B and C in Europe, D model in Korea. Our F-4 version of the F-4 in Vietnam. Had a plane hit there too. Couldn't get back to home base, but got to a safe base. Still able to keep flying. But as I say, along the way, I took the advantage of if they needed to supplies picked up or somebody taken off to school. P-47 was a base support aircraft. I would go fly. Hope that answers the question, because there's quite a number of opportunities. And I'm thankful that I had the opportunities. Certainly the cost of the aviation where technology has taken us makes that even more difficult to accomplish. But if you have the will, sometimes there's a way. And so I'm sure that I won't be the last and I wasn't the only, because there are some. My record is fighter combat of 100 or more missions in each of the 3 conflicts. There are some that did a lot more, and those some had 2 and 3 careers opportunities in Vietnam. So there are some fighter pilots with more time, but certainly you have to be sure you're checking the works in the history to determine that. So I'd say among records, it's there, but it's not the record, I guess is the way to put it.
I have a related question for you, General McGee. This one is from Thomas. So in terms of flying and combat, do you think that World War II, Korea, or Vietnam was more difficult?
I didn't find any of them difficult. Each was a different phase of the aviation opportunity. World War II, air superiority type of flying. Korea, interdiction and ground support. I never saw a MiG because they weren't down in the trees where we were. We were fighting a battle close to the ground. Vietnam, intelligence gathering, another phase. So each phase had its different aspects, its different leadership, its different support. And that's the challenge for our youngsters today. So unfortunately, some of our schools aren't preparing them for the technology. We've got going to be taking a woman to the moon and somebody's going to Mars. And I like to tell youngsters, trainers are going to be too old when they get it all resolved. So those that are going are out there in our school right now.
All right, one more question for you, General, before I have some questions for you, General. But General McGee, Chris M. is asking, did you ever have to bail out of an airplane?
No, partially I answered that. I got hit in Korea, but was able to get back to my home base. and land the plane. Of course, it took major work before it got back into flying because of the damage. Fortunately, it was out in the wing, not in the cockpit. If it had been hit in the cockpit, I might not be here. The same happened in Vietnam. Took a hit in the wing. I was too far from home base to get there, but able to land at a safe base, get a ride back home. In fact, my systems operator who handled the technical stuff on the reconnaissance version, we took our cameras and stuff out of the plane and got a ride back home to keep on flying. And like I say, I ended up in my year flying there with 173 missions. But so it was all, as I say, great leadership, great training, and what we accomplished certainly set some groundwork for the future of our aviation experiences in our country's move to activity, equal access and equal opportunity for one and all. And thank you, General, for your comments and earlier too. Beautiful to hear.
So that's a good lead into my next question. And this question is for General Vares-Lum. What are some of the skills that you think that you are gaining in your military career that you will be able to translate to life after the military?
Well, thank you. And thank you for those answers, General Magee, and thank you for the question. You know, of course, the number one thing is leadership. You know, in the Army, we have this acronym, LDRSHIP, and it's not because we can't spell it in the Army. It's an acronym shortened for loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. But those values have taught me a lot because I've used them when we talk about, you know, what's most important in a unit are the people. If you can learn how to work with people, and that's something you have to do in the most stressful situation and sometimes very complex problems that are not simple, especially when they deal with multiple countries and that you have to solve that and everyone has their own interests, and how do you bring people together? I think that's one of the greatest skills that I will take with me. I'm a military intelligence officer. So, you know, having to take information, sort of like the reconnaissance aircraft that General Magee flew, take that data, synthesize that data, and also convince the operators that the data is credible and you can use it for operations. That's always the challenge. And how do you do that? How do you translate that? And I believe that those kinds of skills, not just management, but leadership, that we can use in our next life. And it's been 34 years for me. So in my next life, it will be something very exciting. And I hope to be able to use those skills in whatever comes in my path. But thank you.
Another question for you, General Vares-Lum. So you began your career, your military association, I believe, at the ROTC at the University of Hawaii. This question is from Vincent M. And he's asking, could you speak to the importance of a college ROTC program?
Yes, ROTC, you know, those friends that I developed and the relationships in the ROTC program were friends to this day. And the reason why is because the things we learned when we had to transition to, I'm going to do the things my way, and oh, now I have to work as a team. You change the way that you look at your role in a team. So I think, you know, it's critical and making you realize that you can do more than you think you can. It stretches your limits. Sometimes we limit ourselves and we can't believe we can do this. And ROTC is the first time and first introduction to the belief and instilling that confidence in you that you can lead, that you can overcome. So I think it's so critically important for a lot of our youngsters today who continue to raise their right hand and be in our ROTC, and a lot of them are getting commissioned this month here at the University of Hawaii. They're for the first time ever going to have to do this virtually. And our own Chief of Staff here, General Ron Clark, who's Infantry Ranger Airborne, is going to give that commissioning speech just like we're doing it today. So we adapt, overcome, and adjust, and that's what we learn in ROTC and for every scenario that life hands us. Thank you.
Yeah, I fully agree. ROTC brings folks together in a way that they have not prior to that type of experience, training. In fact, I think my ROTC training, I never went to boot camp. When I think because of ROTC, when they called me, I went directly into pilot training. So it has this aspect, and it's a way to, you know, we're close with family and neighbors and that type of thing, but it brings many people together in a way that's so important in military service or any service where you're working with other people. And so I totally agree.
Well, thank you both. I have to say that one question really touches me because my daughter herself, she's going to be joining the Navy ROTC this fall. So your words of encouragement, I'm going to make sure that she hears those and has the same military type of background that you both had. I hope for her that she has the same. We have a question here for General Magee, and this is from Curtis M. And Curtis is asking, what is the aircraft that is pictured behind you?
What is the aircraft
that is pictured behind you?
Oh, that's the P-51C. The aircraft that's flying today belongs to and is flown by the Commemorative Air Force Red Tail Squadron. They fly that aircraft to air shows and to locations. But what's also important is they have an educational trailer that drives to locations, shows, I think it's about a 15-minute film to youngsters and gives them a dog tag, but promoting the interest in aviation space career opportunities for our youngsters, but telling the story. You see, what's interesting in the story is that the Tuskegee experience happened even though the Army, from a 1925 War College study, said it's impossible, that we were all second-class citizens, mentally, morally, any other way you want to look at it compared to the white man, and it would not be possible. So the story's out there, and it, sometimes coming with it, for example, I can say there was a statement made that we never lost a bomber. That was stated, and it sounds good and gets repeated, but it isn't correct. So for those that want, when you're looking into history and want the actual story, be sure you get the right story. Our experience, we never lost a bomber in 172 bomber escort missions, but we flew 179. Our record, though, being looked at very carefully, was still tops among those units doing the escort work. So it's also a challenge when you're looking at history and so on, that you be sure that you get the right facts.
It sounds like General Vares-Lum, you were talking about that. You're one of those people that makes sure that the information is correct, right? So that's
right.
Necessary job. So this question is for you, General Vares-Lum. It is, what were the greatest changes you've witnessed in our military culture during your 30+ years of service? The greatest changes in our military culture.
You know, I came out into the Army when it was the Cold War. So when I went to the officer basic course at Fort Huachuca for Army intelligence, we were learning mostly about the Soviet Union. We had 2 weeks of counterinsurgency training from a British officer because they had had experience with the Irish Republican Army, and we had not had significant counterinsurgency training. So, you know, I went, you know, right post 9/11, went to speak at a new lieutenant's officer leader training at Fort Huachuca, and it was reversed. They had 2 weeks of conventional training for conventional threats. So just as General Magee said, air superiority, you know, air defense, all those pieces that come into a conventional fight that you saw during World War II, which was the last time that we had fought that kind of war, to a counterinsurgency fight. So most of their time at officer basic course was counterinsurgency. Now we are currently in a great power competition with Russia, China, and North Korea. So getting back to that capability of doing a conventional fight and balancing our war on terror, that has been this huge shift in the way that we've had to fight. With technology, cyber and space being a key part, with the new Space Force, who would have thought about that? That has significantly changed. Our reliance on cyber and space for all of our 5th gen aircraft, our ships, our subs, our joint force to be able to fight throughout the world, anywhere, anytime. That has significantly changed. In terms of the social aspects, you can look at our force and you can see that the groundwork that was laid by General Magee and all of our World War II veterans who realized that, Senator Inouye and Bob Dole, Republican and Democrat, holding hands together, even though they might have different views, but knowing that we are a part of the same team. You see those lessons learned when you look around. In 2015, the Secretary of Defense opened all jobs to women. So now we have 30 infantry rangers. Who would have thought when I came in, when you couldn't even allow females to be at a brigade level when I was in the 3rd Infantry Division in Germany. And that, today we would have seen General Dunwoody, 4-star, Admiral Howard, 4-star Admiral, Lori Robertson, who was the 4-star Pacific Air Forces commander, and also Northern Command commander. These are huge changes on a social level that we've seen through our country, and that's what makes our country great.
Thank you very much for that answer in general. I remember earlier you said to focus on the possibilities. And so I think that really resonates with me as you speak about the answer of how our culture has changed. Now, I have we have a couple of more minutes that I'd like to ask like 1 or 2 more questions. This one for Brigadier General Magee. This is from Deborah. And I don't know if she knows this. I don't know if Deborah knows this, but General Magee is 100 years old this year. But she's asking, you seem like an active fellow. Do you still fly? What type of aircraft did you last fly in?
Good question. I told them loving flying. Yes, I flew in a Honda jet on my 100th birthday, and the day after I flew in a Cirrus jet with the AOPA, the Airline Pilots Association. But to be able to fly is still a wonderful thing, and I haven't forgotten much. Once you get your hands on the stick, it was a real thrill, and I actually did flying. They kind of laughed because when we were taxiing back in, the owner and pilot of the aircraft put his hands up and said, "See, I'm not touching this thing." So, but again, a wonderful opportunity and a chance to share.
Thank you. One more question from you for you, General Magee. Again, this one came from Connor in New York. He has asked, what is your proudest achievement in your career?
Proudest achievement?
The proudest one.
Well, I haven't tried to add up what's prideful and what's not, but to have served 30 years for our country, still here to share with the youth, and to fortunately be the father of 3, but the grandfather of 10, great-grandfather of 14, and a great-great-grandfather of a young lady now coming up. That's all prideful, and I can say, and as we have moved along, slowly we're getting there, but still look for the day that one day we're all American.
Thank you, General. I want to wrap up our interview. We've had so many questions and so many comments from our viewers. So thank you so much for participating in our webinar today. But before we close, I know a lot of people are probably still interested and want to get more information. So I want to call our museum educator, Ashley. She's going to come on and she's going to share some more resources. So if you'd like to find out more about Tuskegee Airmen, or if you want to find out more about the commemoration to the end of World War II, Ashley's going to tell us where to look. So Ashley, if you could share your screen, please.
Hey, hey guys, my name is Melissa. Really quick, we just want to share with you guys, if you check out our website, we have some more resources for you. So our first thing we have here is more information about Brigadier General Magee and the Tuskegee Airmen. So we have some historical resources and also some books and movies that are based on them. And then secondly, in honor of the 75th commemoration at the end of World War II in Europe, we have some links where you can learn more about VE Day, the history of World War II, and for our teachers, the World War II commemoration page has some really excellent lesson plans if you want to check those out and use them in your classroom. And then coming up in the fall, there's going to be quite a few commemoration events. The ones that were supposed to be in May and around this time for today have actually been moved to the fall because of everything going on with coronavirus in our country. So you can read about those changes here and also the events that will be happening in Hawaii. And again, you can find these resources on our website.
Okay, thank you so much, Melissa. I'm sure our viewers are going to have a lot to the questions they still want to ask, so great resources to look for. So most of all, I want to say thank you to Major General Vares-Lum and also to Brigadier General Magee. So thank you so much for spending this day with us and helping us to honor the memory of what happened on May 8th, 1945, when the victory in Europe occurred. So thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a time to remember, reflect, and certainly a great opportunity to consider this 75th anniversary. Thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you, sir. And to our viewers, if you would like to see a recording of this video, check back to our website at Harbor-Aviation-Museum.org in a day or so, and there'll be a YouTube video of this recorded webinar. And you can also on our website find the educational resource. So aloha and best wishes and good health from the Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum. Bye.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you, General Magee. What an honor. I'm just pinching myself that I get to be on this webinar with you.
Very kind indeed. We wish all to be safe, and certainly a great opportunity as we remember and reflect.
Yes, thank you.
Stay safe.
And it was a pleasure to hear all of your insights from both of you about your careers in the Navy or the Air Force and in the Army. So really appreciate all of that. Quite inspiring, even more so than I could ever imagine. So I'm sure the viewers had felt the same. So, such a pleasure. And
Thank you.
I see it. Shauna's in the room now.
Yes, thank you so much. Are we still broadcasting?
No, I ended the broadcast, and I think we're just in the room now.
Well, General Magee left, but oh, this was amazing. This was an amazing situation. Are we still on? My husband's here. He's still broadcasting. We're still broadcasting.
Okay, I'll have to end the meeting then.
Thank you. Bye now.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.